Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Ambroise Thomas' Hamlet with conductor Eva Bell, chorus master Jeremy Bynes, and dramaturgist Sebastian Hanusa, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Now this is also a concert version, and I mainly knew Ambroise Thomas and the opera Hamlet for a couple of things. Going to the composer, I mainly knew him for two of his most famous operas of all time, Mignon, which was based on Goethe's Wilhelm Meister, and of course Hamlet, which was based on William Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet. And going to my experience with Hamlet, I mainly knew this opera through the drinking song En vain dispise la tristesse, the duet between Hamlet and Ophélie, Doute la lumière, the duet between Hamlet and his mother, Queen Gertrude, and even the very famous mad scene Avenge, mes amis, which then leads up to Palais Blonde, which in turn is a very famous showpiece for many a coloratura soprano. The basic plot to this opera goes like this. The King of Denmark has passed away, and Claudius has taken over the throne and also Gertrude's hand in marriage. Meanwhile, Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, is engaged to Ophelia, who in turn has her brother Laertes' blessing for the both of them to be together in harmony and in the hopes that Hamlet will protect Ophelia from all sorts of harm. And going to the prophecy that Hamlet has to fulfill by his father, it all comes to a head when Marcellus, Horatio, and Hamlet are in a grave and they find the ghost of Hamlet's father, and the ghost pleads Hamlet to avenge his death, for he was killed by a poison thanks to his brother Claudius, and in turn Claudius has usurped the throne, and it is up to Hamlet to take his rightful place on that said throne. In order to expose Claudius as the murderer, Hamlet organizes a troupe of actors to put up a play involving the King Gonzago and his wife Queen Guinevere, and in turn, that very play exposes Claudius as the murderer. The plot thickens as Hamlet even realizes that Polonius might be in on this as well, and he even accuses his own mother, Queen Gertrude, of adultery. Ophelia can no longer take this anymore, considering how Hamlet's behavior has been changing over time, and she fears that their relationship will end up coming undone. Therefore, all of these events take over her to the point where she goes insane and ends up dying. The news of Ophelia's death has reached Laerte to the point where he calls out Hamlet for his misdeeds, and in turn, he wasn't really aware of Ophelia's death. That is until that Hamlet fulfills the prophecy of killing Claudius, and in order to rejoin Ophelia, he ends up stabbing himself, and the opera ends miserably ever after. And now we get to the singers, starting off with Florian Sempey as Hamlet. Now, what you really need in this role is a cavalier baritone. There has been no shortage of baritones who have been singing this particularly iconic prince. We have had the likes of Mattia Battistini, Cheryl Milnes, and Simon Keenleside, who have all donned Hamlet's costumes and even sang his part. Basically, what Hamlet needs is the lyricism of a Ford, the dashing and strong presence of a Conte di Luna, and the dramatic outbursts of an Iago from Otello. So combining lyrical singing with dramatic outbursts is easier said than done, so long as any singer who does Hamlet does it with a refined technique and lots of emotional investment. And I thought that Florian Sempey managed to do quite well in this role, considering how his career has been growing throughout the years. I first heard Monsieur Sempey singing the role of Alphonse from Donizetti's La Favorite, also at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, which in turn was also a concert version. And as I saw his career grow, I was quite amazed at the direction that he was taking. He was able to take on more noble baritone roles such as this, and he even managed to not forget his his lyric baritone roots with the likes of Figaro from Rossini's Il Barbiere di Siviglia. Now, with his performance as Hamlet, he was able to bring in a lot of melancholy, moodiness, anguish, and a lot of introversion to this character, to the point where every time he enters the stage, he seems to always be unsure of himself. He seems to always have his hands on his coat, and he just seems to dart his eyes around, not really knowing of where he is or what his surroundings are doing to him, and even that insecurity that is pervasive all throughout his body. He managed to show it in flying colors, thus making me, as the audience, totally invested in his performance. And in terms of his vocal prowess, I thought that he managed to grow really well. His voice gained in richness, and it still had a very fine quality, which had nobility, youth, and it has a very lovely timbre, to the point where I was really invested with not only his theatrical performance, but also what he was able to do with his voice. Sure, his high notes could be a lot rounder and richer, akin to Leonard Warren and many of the great baritones of the past. But what I got with Florian Sempey is a lot of wonderful potential to grow as a singing actor, and so much promise that he has to offer as one complete performer. He had me on the edge of my seat in terms of how he acted with his part, and he was able to invest a lot of diligence and meticulousness and intelligence to ensure that Hamlet does not come off as a raving lunatic, but as someone who is totally unsure of his surroundings, someone who is very much full of fear and anguish, and someone who was not afraid to let it out when the time comes. Moreover, he's an example of a singer who builds himself up rather well. Sure, there were times that his overly pianissimo singing did tend to be a bit annoying, because since he has such a lovely baritone voice, you would think that the best thing for him to do is just let it out with abandon. And I thought that in the final act, he did that so well, and he was able to let everything out with such magnificence. Overall, I thought that Florian Sempey was a very fine Hamlet, and I really hope the best for his career, and I also hope that he develops his voice in not only the correct way, but also in a way that guarantees him a lot of longevity, because he is on the cusp of not only a brilliant future, but also an international career that guarantees him a lot of doors that will open for him. And then we go to his lover, Ophelia, who was sung by Diana Damrau. Now with Ophelia, the interesting thing about this character is that she was created by the Swedish soprano Christina Nilsson, who was also the inspiration for Christine Daae from Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera. And going to this particular character, this needs a coloratura soprano, especially considering the fact that her mad scene, A vos jeux, mes amis, is a very popular showpiece for many a coloratura soprano, mostly because this ranks really high in terms of a Mount Everest of a part for any coloratura soprano, much like her counterpart, Lucia Ashton from Lucia di Lammermoor. She not only has to sing floridly and lyrically, but she also has to sing those high notes and has to have an amazing technique with everything she has as a coloratura soprano. Essentially, she needs the lyricism of a Pamina and Melisande, the youthfulness of a Blanchen and Gilda, and the great coloratura fireworks of a Lucia, Marie from La Fille du Régiment, Rosina from Barbiere di Siviglia, Filine from Mignon, and even Zerbinetta and Fiacchermili and Zdenka from Ariadne and Arabella respectively. Not to mention, she also needs to have that metamorphosizing quality of a Violetta from La Traviata, considering everything that she has to go through in the entire opera. And she's also one of the characters who is on stage most of the time. And going to Diana Damrau, I was initially skeptical of her performance as Ophelia, considering that I listened to a clip of her rendition of the Mad Scene on YouTube where she sang the role of Ophelia back when she was in Bilbao, and I thought that the high notes were non-existent, the coloratura was sloppy, and it basically felt like it was a voice that needed to go into a whole nother direction. Those were the same sentiments I had when she sang A vos jeux mes amis tonight. I felt like the super high notes were no longer there. Some of the coloratura work was rather patchy and unrefined at best, and she even skipped on some of the notes which lacked in the florid quality of many a true coloratura soprano, and there were even times that her singing left a lot to be desired, especially in that very famous Mad Scene. However, in the first few moments of the opera, I thought that she was able to sing surprisingly well and keep her voice intact, which was saying something considering how some of her high notes maintained that sheen and power. But when all is said and done, I definitely mean it when I say that Diana Damrau deserves to have another vocal direction. She can no longer do the coloratura soprano parts anymore, and it's high time for her to go to the full lyric soprano repertoire. I would like to see her in roles like Micaela from Carmen, Mimi from La Bohème, Rachel from La Juive, and of course Mélisande from Péléas et Mélisande, and Blanche de la Force from Le Dialogue de Carmelite, and even Liu from Turandot and Louise. Those roles, I think, might be a better fit for Diana Damrau. And where Ophelia is concerned, we could have had many other coloratura sopranos singing her. We could have had Anna Dorlovsky. We could have even had Jessica Pratt, Albina Shagimuratova, and maybe even Maria Aleida, Cristina Pulizzi, and Sabina Viviela, just to name a few, considering that there are coloratura sopranos out there who can sing the role of Ophelia with a much cleaner technique and more pristine sounding and sparkling high notes. As for Diana Damrau, she was able to give her best. She showed effort. She showed a lot of guts taking on this role. However, when all is said and done, it is seriously time for her to say farewell to the coloratura soprano parts. The stratospheric notes are no longer there. Some of the coloratura work that she accomplished were kind of hit and miss at best, and there were times that some of the florid singing left a lot to be desired. Even though she continued to be an involving actress, and even though she managed to show a lot of charisma in this particular role. The usurper, King Claudius, was sung by the French bass baritone Nicolas Testé, and what one needs in this particular role is not only a bass baritone, but also a basso cantante who can combine that deep, rich vocal quality of Ferrando from Trovatore and combine that with Monterone's ferocity and vocal strength, with Wotan's high notes, as well as Klingsor's menace, thus making anyone who touches this part a force to be reckoned with. Some of the bass baritones and basses who have sung this part included the likes of José Vendôme and Samuel Ramey, just to name a few. And with Nicolas Testé, I thought he managed to steal the show as Claudius, all thanks to his strong stage presence, which he managed to emit so wonderfully. Everything that came out of his mouth was pure excellence. His stage presence had noble bearing, and he had this tallness which he managed to exude so well. And I salute Monsieur Testé for all of his efforts. Queen Gertrude was the young mezzo-soprano Eve Maud Hubot. And what one needs in Queen Gertrude is a true dramatic mezzo-soprano. Interestingly enough, the first Gertrude was the French falcon soprano Pauline Guimard-Lorté, who was also the first Eboli and who also sang a lot of soprano and mezzo-soprano roles. Now, there's a big reason why this part is quite challenging for many a dramatic mezzo. It is because this part is able to reach quite high for a mezzo, even though she also has to have those typical chest notes. Ergo, the tessitura is quite high for a mezzo-soprano. Moreover, what one needs in La Reine Gertrude is the ferocity and the wide, varied range of an Azucena, the regalness and the tall stage presence of a Fricka, and the deep, low chest notes of a Madame de la Haltière. So basically, La Reine Gertrude is quite the coveted dramatic mezzo part, next to Azucena, Brangena, Fricka, Amneris, Eboli, Frugala, La Zia Principessa, Zita, Herodias, Clytemnestra, Ama, and many other great parts for a true dramatic mezzo. And while I thought Eve Maud Hubaut did a fine and solid job embodying this queen with her regal stage presence and that voice which showed a lot of promise and that had moments of vibrance and beauty, especially in the high notes, there were times that I noticed that when she reached the high notes, that when she reached the more powerful passages, her neck muscles were showing, and that made me feel trepidated because she's still quite a young singer, and when I see those neck muscles being shown that are overdeveloped, especially when she reaches those powerful passages, it makes me think red alert, because it is also a sign of an unrefined technique and a voice that is in need of a lot of saving. Now, I am hoping that she irons out that problem so that she can save her voice from developing any form of nodules, because Eve Maud Hubaut has a lot of potential. She is a brilliant young talent who is smart and absolutely gorgeous on stage, and I do not want to see her career nor her voice in jeopardy. Moreover, she does have a lovely voice. It is well projected in the high notes. She has a very nice color to her voice. Some of the chest notes do need a little bit more development, and I highly recommend her to take a gander and listen to these following mezzo-sopranos, namely Armida Persi Petinella, Bruna Castagna, Margherita Klose, Karin Brancel, Kerstin Torborg, Ebe Stignani, Irene Minghini Cataneo, Chloe Elmo, Elena Nicolai, and even Christa Ludwig, Agnes Balza, and many other great dramatic mezzos, or even great mezzos of the past, so that she can have an idea what a true mezzo-soprano voice sounds like. In spite of some of the troubles she has had with her voice, I still hope that Eve Maud Hubaut manages to iron out all of those problem spots so that one day she can be able to rise on her own as a very fine singer who has a lot to give in the world. Even though this role is rather thankless, I thought that Philippe Talbot managed to make the best out of Learte. Why do I say that Learte is a very thankless role for a lyric tenor? Because he only appears in the first act and ends up appearing in the fifth act. So even though his appearance is really limited, he nonetheless needs to have a superb technique. He needs to combine that fine, lovely, high singing involved in roles like Elvino from Sonambula and Arturo from I Puritani with pure lyricism found in Alfredo from Traviata, the Duke from Rigoletto, Tamino from Zauberflöte, and even that youthfulness found in Pedrillo from Die Entführung aus dem Sahel. I have heard Philippe Talbot's name many times, especially considering that I have been researching a lot on his career. He seems to specialize in a huge array of lyric tenor roles, from Conte Almaviva, from Il Barbiere di Siviglia, all the way up to Le Comte d'Henri. And while I thought his voice had a certain amount of beauty and grace and so much potential to grow, there were certain things about it that I was not a fan of. There were times that his singing sounded really masky and there were times that a certain nasality was creeping in on his voice. And I'm pretty sure that once he irons out all of those problem spots, once he develops his technique in the right and precise way, he can come into his own. For now, he's been quite well known all throughout Europe, and he has so much promise to give to the world. So here's hoping that Philippe Talbot will continue to develop his technique in the right and correct way, and here's hoping that he will also have a brilliant future ahead of him. Andrew Harris was amazing as the ghost of the former king. Now, even though this role is quite short, it still needs a true basso cantante or basso profondo to embody this role. This may not be as coveted as, let's say, Boris Godunov or Don Giovanni or Don Quixote or even Philip II or Sparafucile, just to name a few. But the fact that there were some bassos who managed to embody this character is a very laudable effort from each of them, especially considering that they embody this character part with their voices. And with Andrew Harris, he was able to put his basso cantante voice to great use. His stage presence was commanding, and he left me at the edge of my seat every time he opened his mouth. It was that amazing, and every time he sang, I was able to keep very keen attention on him in terms of how he was able to embody this character, and he exceeded my expectations. Byung-Gil Kim was a very fine Polonius. Now, don't let the role of Polonius fool you. Even though his part is rather short, he still needs a bass to sing this role. There have been bassos who have been singing the likes of Leporello and even Dr. Bartolo, who have even sung this character part and managed to find success as Polonius. And with Byung-Gil Kim, I can never go wrong with him in terms of his talents as a very fine singer. He was able to use his tall and dashing stage presence to bring this character to life, and there were even times that his voice did show a lot of potential to grow, and here's hoping that it will grow not only in the right way, but also with more fullness and richness as the years roll by. Thomas Lehmann was a tall, dashing, and handsome Horacio, and this role calls for either a baritone or a bass baritone. Usually any singer who sings the likes of Mazzetto, Guglielmo, or many other character or lyric baritone parts would also sing this role. And what more can one expect from Thomas Lehmann? He was absolutely dashing in this particular role, and he was able to give the goods, all thanks to his finely tuned voice, which is akin to a cello, and his handsome, commanding stage presence, which made him all the more alluring to witness. Andrew Dickinson was equally as fabulous as Marcellus. Now I must reiterate, this part must not be underestimated, because many a light lyric tenor even attempted this role, including Edgaras Montvidas, who sang this role in the early 2000s. There have been a lot of light lyric tenors and even character tenors who have specialized in this part and have also been very well known in a lot of the Italian and French operas, most notably as the Count Almaviva from Il Barbiere di Siviglia. And with Andrew Dickinson, I can never go wrong with him either. He continues to use his lyric tenor voice to embody this character so well, and he was able to do so with so much grace and so much style that I was practically eating out of the palms of his hands. I also have to give a lot of credit to Philippe Yekal and Ya-Chung, who managed to do very fine jobs as the gravediggers, as their voices blended really well. So overall, some parts of the singing could have been a lot better, and I definitely have to give so much credit to Florian Sempey for leading such an otherwise fine ensemble. And yes, we could have had other coloratura sopranos singing the role of Ophelia. Moreover, we could have had a true dramatic mezzo sing the role of La Reine Gertrude. And the ones that fared the best were, Florian Sempey, Nicolas Testé, and Andrew Harris, considering that they were able to give these three pivotal male roles a lot of depth, emotion, feeling, and strength. And it's also reflected on the way they sang their respective parts. So I definitely have to salute Monsieur Sempey, Monsieur Testé, and Mr. Harris for jobs well done. The conducting done by Yves Abel was really well done. He made sure that the orchestra went together, and he made sure that he did not skip a beat. And the chorus and orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin were, as always, fabulous all around. So overall, with some singing that was decent at best, especially considering that the cast was led by Florian Sempey, Nicolas Testé, and Andrew Harris, to some really fine conducting done by Yves Abel, and equally great jobs by the orchestra and the chorus of the Deutsche Oper Berlin, this was an evening well spent. And I still have to give credit to Diana Damrau for at least pulling it together as Ophelia, even though she really needs to consider another repertoire. And for those of you who saw this particular concert version of Hamlet at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Did you feel like Florian Sempey stole the show as the titular hero? Did you feel like Nicolas Testé or Andrew Harris stole his thunder? Did you feel like Diana Damrau could have been replaced by another coloratura soprano as Ophelia? Or did you feel like there were other singers who were the weak links of this particular concert version of Hamlet? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for my review of Wagner's Tristan und Isolde at the Staatsoper unter den Linden. So until then, good night everybody.